Hi, welcome back. You can tell time has passed from my last video because now I have a mustache and more pimples. In my last video, I talked about breaking my foot and moving out of Colorado back to my parents' home in Tennessee for a surgery I ended up not needing. And I also mentioned how I had these big ideas of these big trips and these big adventures, but I was pretty vague and it made me feel like one of those people you see on dating apps that just has "I love going on adventures" in their bio. So I wanted to use this video to kind of go into more details about what it is I want to do, the timeline I want to do it on, and all that extra stuff. In my last video, I mentioned how I really value my time outside, whether that's hiking or running or climbing or riding my bike. The short of it is, I just love being outside. And most of my time so far being back at my parents' house has been spent indoors, scrolling on my phone. This entire time I've been back at my parents' house, the most I can do is just walking, just because that's what my doctor has told me I can do with my foot. I have my final orthopedic appointment this week, so hopefully I get some good news and I can start riding my bike and climbing and doing all that fun stuff again. But back to the main topic. There has been an itch in the back of my head that I'd like to scratch, and that is the concept of bike packing. What's bike packing, you might ask? Well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is the combination of riding your bicycle and backpacking. These trips can range in distances and difficulty, and it's something I've wanted to get into for quite some time. You might also be asking yourself, has this guy ever done this before? No, I have not. Touring around on a bike and supporting myself the whole way sounds like a really enticing way to spend time outdoors to me. So this is something right up my alley. But to do something that puts me out of my comfort zone, lets me see the country in a way that I haven't before, I've also come up with something I'm calling the 4-stage plan. This plan is pretty vague and leaves a lot of wiggle room. I think a good plan leaves a lot of wiggle room just so I can kind of roll with the punches. You know, nothing is ever going to be set in stone. Phase 1 is to get money and get fit. To accomplish these goals that I have, I need to be in good physical condition, and I need money to afford these kinds of things. It's expensive to go on big trips. And right now, I've come up with some home workout plans that I'm doing, as well as walking a lot just to keep my cardio up before I can start running again. And phase 1 will be ongoing. I can constantly be working on my fitness. I can constantly be, increasing my revenue. Phase 2 is find the right gear for the job. Something my dad always told me when I was getting into cycling is that before you fall in love with the gear, you got to fall in love with the sport. And I already know I love riding my bike. I already know that this is something I'd like to invest in. But the preliminary stages of doing this, I'd like to use as much gear as I already have. I don't think my bike will be up to the task, so I am looking at picking up another bike. Again, there's a little bit of wiggle room in that. I can use a lot of the camping gear that I already have, and, all of this is going to change with more experience. So the more I do it, the more informed I'll be on what works for me. Phase 3 is planning the routes. Right now, I've got 3 routes in mind, each getting progressively larger and larger. And knowing from experience in the backpacking world, planning a trip and all of the contingencies that might be involved in the trip really comes down to having an effective plan before getting into it. So there's going to be a lot of research on my part. The first trip I have in mind is bikepacking route here in Tennessee called the No Business Loop. I think it's about 130-ish miles, and I think there's enough information on this loop to where I could really plan it effectively. This first trip I'd like to do with as much gear as I already own as possible. I think I could do the no business loop with proper training in 2 to 3 days. Make it some kind of a 2 nights, 3 days type thing. The second trip I'd like to go on is segment 6 of the Eastern Divide Trail. The whole Eastern Divide runs the entire East Coast from Canada to Florida. Segment 6 in particular runs from a point in Virginia to a point in Georgia following the Appalachian Mountains. So I'd like to modify this route a little bit and just run from the North Carolina-Virginia border to the North Carolina-Georgia border, pretty much exactly following that trip. This could range anywhere from 400-ish miles to 600-ish miles. It all depends on how much I want to bite off. The final trip I'd like to do, I mean, it's the big one. It's the Tour Divide. It's the Great Divide mountain bike route. This is what's considered maybe the most famous bikepacking route in the world. This runs from Banff, Canada to Antelope Wells, New Mexico, following the Continental Divide. Maybe I'm romanticizing it a little bit, but I think I could do it. It's about 2,700 miles. And phase 4 is to do the dang thing, is to make it happen, is to go on that big trip and accomplish it. All the while filming everything through the entire process. And it sounds crazy in my head right now, especially because it's something I've never done before. Some would say I'm biting off more than I could chew. But I would say you might be right, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'll keep you updated, and I'll see you around.